Welcome to our deep dive into the nature of time. I am so excited to get into this with you, especially this book by Carlo Rovelli, The Order of Time.
Yeah.
It just dives right into some of the biggest questions about time. Questions I bet you thought about too.
Oh, absolutely. It really digs into what physics actually says about time.
On how different that is from how we think about it every day.
Yeah, and it's really surprising how much of what we think we know about time just isn't so.
Yeah. It's like, whoa, hold on. My mind is already kind of starting to bend here.
It's a real shift, yeah.
Hmm.
Rovelli even compares it to, like, when you hold a snowflake and it just melts between your fingers.
I love that. Okay, so let's build the snowflake of our usual time ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
We usually think of time as flowing at the same rate everywhere,
Okay.
always going from past to future.
Yeah.
And we think the past is fixed, the future is open,
Right.
and clocks tick consistently no matter where they are.
Yeah.
That's just how we think about time, right?
And you know what? Physics has actually shown that none of that is right.
Whoa, really? Wait a minute. So time might not be this universal thing that we think it is.
Nope.
The book talked about, like, mountains and people aging differently based on where they live. Is that really true?
Yeah, it's totally true. Yeah. It's because of Einstein and his theory of general relativity. It turns out time runs slower when gravity is strong.
So if you're closer to the Earth,
Mm-hmm.
time actually goes slower for you.
Yeah.
Wait, so my time's different from someone who lives on top of Mount Everest.
You got it. And it's measurable. It's not just some theory. The stronger the gravity, the slower time moves.
Wow.
In the book, Rovelli even points out that, a clock on the floor runs a little slower than a clock on a table,
Oh, wow, just because it's closer to the Earth.
just because it's closer to the Earth.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess that means time is relative, not just in how we feel it, but like in a physical way.
Absolutely. And that actually leads us to why things fall down. We think it's all about gravity as a force.
Mhm.
But really, objects just move toward where time is slower.
So they're not being pulled down, they're being pushed by, like, a time difference.
That's a good way to think about it. Think about it like this.
Mm.
If you're running from the beach into the ocean,
Yeah,
the water pushes against your legs and makes you fall forward.
yeah.
It's kind of like that with gravity. Objects, they fall towards slower time, like they're hitting this resistance.
So it's not a force pulling down, it's time pushing things. I don't even know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah,
That's hard to wrap my head around.
it is. But it really makes you think about gravity in a different way.
Yeah, it really does.
Rovelli puts it so well. He says, things fall downward because down there, time is slowed by the Earth.
Okay, my mind is officially blown.
Wild.
Before we go any further with this, there's this interesting part where Rovelli talks about this old Greek philosopher, Anaximander.
Oh, yeah, Anaximander. He was so ahead of his time.
Right, like centuries before anyone else, he figured out that the Earth floats in space.
I know, it's incredible. And then there's Sadi Shirazi,
That Persian poet.
whose work is actually connected to Sadi Carnot.
Wait, Sadi Carnot, the guy who helped us understand time?
Exactly. And get this, Carnot's father. He loved Shirazi's poetry so much that he named his son after him.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. So how does Carnot, the steam engine guy, end up changing how we think about time?
Well, he made this crucial connection. He realized steam engines work because heat always flows from hot to cold.
Okay, yeah, a hot cup of coffee cools down, it doesn't suddenly get hotter.
Exactly. It seems obvious now, but back then it was a huge deal.
So we take it for granted that heat flows one way, but why is that a big deal for understanding time?
Because it's the only thing in physics, the only law, that actually tells us the past is different from the future.
Wait, really?
Think about it. Newton's laws of motion, Einstein's relativity, even quantum mechanics, all those equations, they work the same forwards and backwards in time.
So you're saying time travel could be possible according to those laws?
Potentially. But the flow of heat, that one-way street, it's what gives us this arrow of time, this feeling of time moving forward that we experience.
Oh, wow. So the next time I see ice melting, I'm actually seeing what makes time move forward.
You got it.
That's deep. But where does this guy, Ludwig Boltzmann, fit into all of this? The book kind of calls him a tragic hero of science.
Boltzmann, he's the one who connected this arrow of time to the idea of entropy. And yeah, his life did have a bit of a tragic ending.
So entropy, that's the whole disorder thing, right?
Exactly. Things naturally tend to get more disordered over time.
Like my bedroom.
Huh. Exactly. It takes effort to tidy up, but chaos just kind of happens if you leave things alone.
Okay, so what does entropy have to do with time, and why is Boltzmann such a big deal in all this?
He had this incredible insight. He realized that entropy, it exists because of how we see the world. We can't see every single molecule, every little interaction. So we see heat flowing in one direction, and we experience time moving forward.
So, because we can't see everything clearly, time seems to move forward. It's like a trick of perception.
Exactly. He realized that if we could see all those tiny details of the universe, the past and the future would look the same. Time, at its core, it's about us not knowing everything.
Time is ignorance.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. So our limited view of the world is actually what creates our experience of time.
You're getting it. And that brings us to another big misconception, this idea that there's this one single time ticking away for everyone everywhere. Physics actually says, no, there are lots of local times.
Lots of times. Come on, now you're just messing with me.
It's true. Every clock, every process, even you and me, we all experience time a little differently. It's called proper time. And relativity gives us the math to actually figure out the differences between these times, like how the clock on the floor runs slower than the one on the table.
Wait a minute. Okay, let's try a thought experiment. Let's say my sister's on that planet, Proxima b. That's 4 light years away. If I look at her through a really powerful telescope, am I seeing her right now?
That's the thing. That question doesn't really make sense. What you're seeing through that telescope is light that left her planet 4 years ago. So you're seeing her past, not her present.
So there is no one single now across the whole universe.
Nope. The way we think about now, that present moment, it only works locally. There's no universal right now for the entire universe.
Okay, this is really messing with how I think about reality.
He has a big shift.
So we've got multiple times, no single present, and then the book compares time to genealogy, like family trees.
I know, right? It's a really cool way to show what we call partial order in physics.
Partial order.
Yeah, like generations in a family. Events in the universe have this partial order. Some events are definitely before or after others, but lots of events, they have no set relationship in time.
So it's not a straight timeline. It's more like this messy web of events where some things are fixed, but others are kind of floating.
You got it. There's no single now for the whole universe, just like there's no one generation for everyone in a family tree. Some events are definitely before or after, but many just exist together without a fixed time relationship.
I think I'm starting to get this partial order idea, but then we go from family trees to black holes, which is a big jump.
It is, but black holes, they're the ultimate example of how gravity warps time. At the edge of a black hole, time actually stops completely.
Wait, hold on. You're saying time stops?
Stops dead.
Seriously?
Yep. Because gravity is so strong near a black hole, it bends space-time so much that even light can't escape. Think of it like a bowling ball on a trampoline. The ball makes a dip in the fabric.
Okay, I've heard that analogy before.
Well, that's kind of what massive objects do to space-time. Planets and stars make these dips, and these dips change how things move, including how time flows.
So planets are like surfing on these curves made by stars.
That's a great way to think about it. And the deeper the dip, the slower time goes. That's why time slows down near black holes.
Okay, yeah. It's amazing how gravity can warp both space and time. But I also remember reading about quantum mechanics and how that messes with our idea of time, too. You mentioned quantized time earlier, right?
Quantum mechanics. That's where things get really weird. It's the world of the super small. And it's like our regular ideas about time just don't apply there.
Okay, how does quantum mechanics change how we think about time?
Well, one of the main things in quantum mechanics is that things are uncertain until they're measured. It's like reality is blurry with a bunch of possibilities existing at once. And then when we observe something, it's like the universe has to choose just one.
So it's like the universe is playing a game of chance and we're forcing it to reveal its hand by looking at it.
I like that. And this measurement problem, it really changes how we think about time. Some people believe it means time itself might be quantized, like it's not smooth and continuous, but comes in tiny separate packets.
So time jumps from moment to moment instead of flowing.
That's one way to think about it. And if that's true, our ideas about the past, present, and future, well, they get even more blurry. It's like time itself is dissolving at this really tiny level.
Man, this whole deep dive is making my head spin. But it's so cool to think about how our experience of time, that feeling of moments flowing together, might actually be coming from this fuzzy, uncertain quantum world. It's like our brains are doing some crazy magic trick, making it all seem smooth.
I know, right? And all those stories we tell ourselves about our lives, they're what gives time meaning for us. We're not just watching time go by, we're building it, weaving together memories, what we see and feel now, and what we imagine will happen.
We are time. I'm going to need a minute to think about that one. But if time is so connected to how we experience it, why does it make us feel so much? Why does it feel so big and scary, but also so beautiful and awe-inspiring?
That's a question that's puzzled people for ages. Rovelli also thinks about this in the book. He says maybe this is what time really is for us, not just the physics, but how we feel it.
So it's not about clocks or planets. It's about how those things make us feel, how time makes our memories, our dreams, our hopes, and our fears.
Exactly. And maybe, as he suggests, those feelings, that's the real heart of time.
I love that. It brings time back to what it means to be human, to be alive in this always changing universe.
And speaking of being alive, at the end of the book, Rovelli gets really personal. He thinks about his own life ending and what it means to find meaning in a universe that doesn't really care about us.
That sounds intense. I'm ready to hear what he has to say about life, death, and the whole big picture.
It's amazing how much we've already unpacked in our deep dive into time.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot to take in.
And we've only just scratched the surface of what physics is telling us.
Right. My mind is still blown by the idea that we each have our own little bubble of time.
It's pretty wild, isn't it?
But it makes me think, if time is so personal, so relative, what about how we measure it? Like days, hours, minutes, seconds? Do those even mean anything real, or are they just things we made up?
You know, that's a great question. And it turns out, even how we divide up time is way more random than you might think. For centuries, the length of an hour actually changed depending on the time of year.
What? Seriously? So like a summer hour was longer than a winter hour?
Exactly. During the
Yeah.
summer, when the days were longer, the hours were longer too, and in the winter, they were shorter.
Wow, that's so strange. Imagine trying to schedule anything back then.
Right. It wasn't until we invented mechanical clocks back in the 14th century that we started to standardize time the way we do now.
So that feeling of time being chopped up into these neat little units, that's actually a pretty new thing.
It is. It makes you wonder, how did that change how we actually experience time?
Well, I definitely feel that pressure of the clock ticking in my life now. Maybe if we still had those stretchy summer hours, things would feel less rushed.
It's an interesting thought, right? And speaking of changes in how we think about time, did you know that the idea of everyone being on the same time, like with time zones, that only happened in the 19th century?
Really? Why was that?
Technology. With the telegraph and trains, people needed to coordinate across long distances. So we had to come up with time zones and a standardized system.
So before that, every little town had its own time.
Pretty much. It's a reminder of how much our experience of time is shaped by our technology and how we organize ourselves as a society.
It's like we've imposed this artificial grid on top of something that was much more natural and fluid before.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I'm also curious about how our bodies experience time. You know, we've been talking about clocks and calendars, but what about our internal sense of time?
Well, our bodies are actually full of internal clocks. Think about our
Okay.
circadian rhythms, the things that tell us when to sleep and wake up,
Right, right.
or even all the complex chemical processes happening inside our cells. We're constantly measuring and responding to time on all these different levels.
So it's not just about the clocks on the wall, it's about these rhythms that are built into our very existence.
Exactly. Life itself is a dance with time. It's this constant back and forth between change and stability, growth and decay.
That's a cool way to think about it.
And Rovelli makes this really interesting connection between this link between time and life and the very beginning of life on Earth.
So we're going way back to the primordial soup now. What does that have to do with time?
Well, he points out that for any complex system to get started, it needs some kind of oscillation, a back and forth rhythm.
Okay, like a heartbeat.
Exactly. And what's more fundamental than the cycle of day and night, that rhythm of light and darkness that has shaped life on Earth from the very beginning.
So are you saying that the beat of time, like the pulse of the planet, could have actually sparked the first life?
It's a pretty amazing idea, right?
Yeah.
Shows how time isn't just some abstract concept. It's woven into the fabric of the universe and everything in it.
That's amazing. Speaking of the fabric of the universe, let's go back to physics for a bit. The book dives into this idea of space-time, which, I'll be honest, I still don't totally get.
It is a tricky concept. But it's so important for understanding how gravity works and how it affects time. Basically, what Einstein showed us is that space and time aren't separate things. They're woven together into this four-dimensional fabric we call space-time.
Okay, 4 dimensions. Now you're really losing me.
Think of it like this. To describe where something is, you need 3 dimensions, right? length, width, height.
Right, like a 3D map.
Exactly. But to describe an event, you also need to say when it happens. That's where time comes in as the fourth dimension.
So every event, every moment, everything that happens has its own address in this four-dimensional space-time.
You got it. And here's the crazy part. Space-time isn't this rigid, unchanging grid. It can be bent and warped by gravity.
Wait, warped? What does that even look like?
Imagine a trampoline with a bowling ball in the middle. The ball makes a dent in the fabric, right?
Yeah, classic physics example.
Well, that's kind of what massive objects like planets and stars do to space-time. They create these dips, and those dips change how things move, including how time flows.
So planets are like surfing on these curves in space-time created by stars.
That's a great way to visualize it. And the deeper the dip, the slower time goes. That's why time runs slower near really massive objects like black holes.
Okay, that makes sense. It's incredible how gravity affects both space and time. But I also remember reading about quantum mechanics and how that throws another wrench into our understanding of time. Didn't you mention something about quantized time earlier?
Ah, yes, quantum mechanics. That's the realm of the really, really small, where things get even weirder. At these incredibly tiny scales, our normal ideas about time just don't work anymore.
So how does quantum mechanics mess with our understanding of time?
Well, one of the big ideas in quantum mechanics is that things only become definite when they're observed. Before that, they exist in a state of uncertainty, with all sorts of possibilities existing at the same time. It's like reality is blurry until we look at it.
So it's like the universe is constantly flipping a coin, and we force it to choose heads or tails by looking at it.
That's a great way to think about it. And it's this whole idea of observation changing reality. It's called the measurement problem. And it has big implications for how we think about time. Some people believe it means that time itself comes in tiny, discrete packets, like the ticks of a clock. It's called quantized time.
So instead of flowing smoothly, time jumps ahead in these little bursts.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And if that's true, then our usual notions of past, present, and future get even more fuzzy. It's like the very fabric of time is dissolving at these incredibly small scales.
My head is officially spinning. But it's so fascinating to think that our experience of time, this smooth flow of moments, might actually be built from this fuzzy, uncertain quantum world. It's like our brains are doing some amazing tricks, stitching it all together into a coherent story.
It really is, and those stories, those personal narratives of time that we create, are what give our lives meaning. We're not just watching time go by. We're actively shaping it, weaving together our memories, our perceptions, and our hopes for the future.
We are time. I'm going to have to think about that one for a while. But it makes me wonder, if time is so closely tied to how we experience it, why does it stir up such strong emotions in us? Why do we feel such awe, such sadness, such a sense of urgency about time's passing?
That's a question that poets and philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries, and Rovelli reflects on it in his book as well. He suggests that maybe these emotions, this feeling of time slipping away, are at the very heart of what time means to us. It's not just about the physical processes, the ticking clocks and orbiting planets. It's about how we feel those things happening, how they shape our memories, our hopes, and our fears.
So it's not just about measuring time, it's about experiencing it, feeling its weight, its lightness, its joy, and its sorrow.
Exactly. And maybe, as Rovelli suggests, that feeling, that emotional depth, is ultimately what time is for us.
I love that. It brings time back to our human experience, to what it means to be alive in this constantly changing universe.
And speaking of being alive, Rovelli ends his book on a really personal note. He thinks about his own mortality and what it means to search for meaning in a universe that doesn't seem to care about us one way or another.
Wow, that sounds heavy. I'm ready to hear what he has to say about life, death, and the meaning of it all. It's like, after all this mind-blowing physics, black holes, and quantum stuff, the biggest mystery is still how time makes us feel.
I know, it's really something. We can, map out the universe, figure out all these laws of physics, but how we feel about time passing, that sense of wonder, and sometimes, even fear, it's still a huge puzzle.
And I really like how Rovelli doesn't try to avoid those big questions about life and death. He even talks about getting older and what it means to find meaning in a universe that isn't really about us.
He's so honest about it, too.
Yeah.
Remember the part where he talks about not being afraid of death itself, but of the suffering, the pain of losing people he loves.
Yeah, that really hits home, doesn't it? It's not the idea of dying that's scary. It's losing the people we care about and knowing that's going to happen. But even though he knows that, Rovelli still focuses on living in the present, appreciating the beauty of the world, even though it's all temporary.
It's a good reminder to enjoy each moment. Find joy in the small things, like going for a walk, having dinner with someone you love, taking time to just think.
Yeah, those are the things that make life feel rich and meaningful no matter how much time we have.
Right. And even though he sees how vast and indifferent the universe is, Rovelli finds some comfort in knowing we're all connected. We might be small on this tiny planet, but we're part of this huge, amazing story, made from the same stuff as the stars.
It is humbling, isn't it? Our lives might be short, but they're a part of something incredible that's been going on for billions of years.
Exactly.
And for Ravelli, meaning isn't about finding some big universal purpose. It's about the relationships we build, the memories we make, the impact we have on the world.
It's a really beautiful way to think about it. Finding purpose in the everyday things, in being human, even though we all die someday.
And it's about being okay with not knowing everything, accepting that we may never fully understand time or the universe, but still being amazed by it all.
That journey of trying to understand, of figuring out who we are and where we fit in, that's what makes life so interesting.
It's about asking those big questions, questioning what we think we know and being open to new ideas and never losing that curiosity, that desire to keep learning.
And Ravelli says it perfectly at the end of the book. He says, we may smile now, we can go back to serenely immersing ourselves in time, in our finite time, to savoring the clear intensity of every fleeting and cherished moment of the brief circle of our existence.
It's like he's saying, embrace life, enjoy every moment, find joy in just being. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the nature of time. It's been an amazing journey. We started with melting snowflakes, explored black holes, talked about ancient philosophers and quantum mysteries.
We learned that time isn't what we thought it was. It's not this fixed universal thing ticking away for everyone the same way. It's relative, it's personal, it's tied to how we experience it.
And in the end, time is still a mystery. It makes us wonder and worry. But maybe it's not about solving the mystery of time, but about appreciating it. The gift of being able to experience things, to remember, to connect, to just be.
It's the gift that lets us live, love, create, and make our mark on the world, even if it doesn't last forever.
And that's a great place to leave it. Thanks for joining us on this incredible exploration of time. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the mysteries of the universe.